All right, I'm sharing my screen with you, so please just make sure you can see. All right, so let's have a look at the IELTS writing paper. So the paper lasts 1 hour. And within this 1 hour, there are 2 writing tasks, task 1 and task 2. This is important. Task 2 is worth more marks than task 1. Okay, it's worth twice as much. This is because task 1 is only 150 words and task 2 is 250 words. Okay, so within this 1 hour, you should be spending more time on task 2. So on task 1, you could spend about 20 minutes. And task 2, you should be spending about 40 minutes. So please make sure when you do the test that you leave enough time to finish task 2 in 40 minutes. All right, so there's 2 different tests for writing. One is for academic and one is for general. So the same as the reading test, please know which test you're writing. If you're writing the academic test, you need to practice for academic. If you're doing the general test, you need to do practice for the general test. So first, let's look at the academic test. For task 1, you need to describe visual information. So for this task, you'll get some kind of visual information. This will either be a diagram, you may get a chart or a graph or a table, or you could get a map. And whichever type of information you get, you need to describe the information, report on the data, and write a description of it. This is what we're going to be looking at in today's lesson. We're going to have a look at the different types of information and how to write about them. For task 2, you need to write an academic essay. So you may be asked to provide a solution to something, look at a problem. You may have to compare and contrast different ideas or opinions, or you may need to write about an argument or idea. Okay. So what we'll be doing tomorrow is having a look at the different types of academic essays and how to write about them. For general training, task 1 is completely different. So for task 1 in the general exam, you have to respond to a given situation. You usually have to do this by writing a letter. So you may need to write a formal letter, an informal letter, responding to the situation. Okay. You also may be asked to request for information or to explain a situation to someone. For task 2 general, you'll also be writing an essay. So the skills that we learn here will be similar to the skills we'll be using for the general as well. So you'll have to write an essay in response to a point of view, an argument, or a problem. Okay, this is an academic essay. This is also an essay. It just means that the topic will be a general topic, not an academic topic. But the skills we use will be the same for both of these. All right, the next thing we need to look at is how do we get our band score for writing? We know that for reading and for listening, we just add up our score out of 40, and then we work out our band score from there. But writing is a little bit different. So for writing, we have our band score criteria. So if we have a look here, we have 4 different criteria: task achievements. For task 2, we have task achievement as well. Then we have coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. So for each of these different criteria, we get a band score from 1 until 9. Okay, so for example, if you have a wide range of lexical resource, which is grammar, then you may get a 7 or an 8. If you make lots of mistakes with grammar, this criteria over here, if you make many mistakes, if you only use basic grammar, like present simple, then you'll get a lower band score, maybe something like a 5. Let's have a closer look at what these criteria mean. So we know that for our IELTS scale, we get from a band 9 to a band 1, okay? If you get a band 1, it's where you only know a few words in English. If you get a band 9, it's somebody who has a full command and a very good level of English. Right, so these are the different criteria for the writing. Task 1 is called task achievement. This is the first criteria, the first column. And for task 2, we call it task response. Okay, it's very similar. We just use different names. So this means how you carry out the task. Do you cover all the necessary points? Do you answer all the questions in the task? Do you include the key information that is required for task 1? Okay, do you include all the key information about the graph or the map? And for task 2, do you develop your ideas effectively and support your ideas with evidence and examples? So this evidence and examples here is important. Okay, so task achievement and task response is how well did you answer the task? The next criteria, coherence and cohesion, this looks at how well you order and present the content of your writing. So this is it organized logically? Are things in the correct order? For example, if you're talking about a process, if you're describing a process, do you put the steps in the correct order? Is it divided into paragraphs correctly? So usually we would use 3 or 4, sometimes 5 paragraphs. So you shouldn't have everything just in one paragraph. And then do you link your ideas and information together so that the reader can easily follow you? So this is where we start looking at things like linking words and cohesive devices. So these will be things like although and moreover, etc. Okay, so linking words falls into this criteria. The next one is a lexical resource. If you don't know what lexical means, this just refers to vocabulary. Okay, so this concerns vocabulary, whether you have a wide range. So do you know lots of vocabulary? Can you use lots of different words, not repeating the same word again and again? Okay, so range of vocabulary as well as whether you use it correctly and appropriately. So using the correct word at the correct time. And the last criteria is grammatical range and accuracy. So this assesses how wide a range of different structures and sentences you use. Okay, so do you use lots of different grammar tenses, past tenses, present tenses, passive tenses, and so on? And also, can you use them effectively? Also, do you have a good control of grammar and sentence structure? And are there many errors or only few occasional ones? So if you make many errors, you may be getting a band 5 or lower. If you only make occasional errors, this could be a band 6 and higher. All right, so for both of these, vocabulary and grammar, your band score also depends on how many errors you make and how correct your grammar and vocabulary is. Right, we'll be having another look at the different band score criteria and what they mean later on in the course. For now, let's get started with task 1. Because most of you are doing the academic IELTS, we only have time to focus on the academic IELTS in these live lessons. For task 2, the skills are very similar. So the skills that we learn in academic, you can use for general as well. But task 1 is completely different. So today we only have time to do task 1 for academic. So if you're doing the general test, what I suggest is that instead of staying for this lesson, I would like you to go onto the Campus UK LMS. And if you go down to section 4, writing, you can download this worksheet for the general writing task 1. Okay, so you can see it here, lecture 11. You can download the worksheet and go through it by yourself at home. Okay, then you can have a look at the answers. And I also posted 2 videos for you, one about an informal letter and one about a formal letter. Okay, so again, if you're doing the general IELTS, we're only doing academic task 1 in this lesson today, so you don't need to stay for the lesson. It'll be better for you to leave, go and download this worksheet, do it at home by yourself now, and you can watch these videos that will help you. Okay, each of these is about 40 minutes, so it's really a good look at how to write letters for IELTS. Right, if you do want to stay, that's up to you, but you won't be able to use the skills that we do in this lesson for the general writing test. So it's better for you to go and do this by yourself. Remember, I always post extra worksheets for you. There's a lot of vocabulary worksheets and a grammar worksheet. So after the lesson, you can go have a look here and download any extra things, read them at home. They're very helpful. Remember that there are always videos in the discussion stream as well. I posted 4 different videos about task 1 that you can watch for academic as well. Okay, so if you're doing the academic task 1, then you can stay for this lesson. If you're doing general, then go and download the worksheet. Otherwise, let's get started. We've got a lot to do. All right, so the first thing we're going to have a look at is describing charts, tables, and graphs. So these are some of the different kinds of visual information that we get for task 1. All right, as we go through the questions, please use the chat box to answer. So let's first have a look at the different types of visual information that we're going to see for task 1. Here we have some examples and we need to match them to the correct words at the top. All right, just 1 second. You can start looking at the diagrams. All right, so please use the chat box to answer the questions. Let's start with this diagram over here, number 1. Please type the letter in the chat box that matches with picture number 1. So is it a diagram, a map, a pie chart, a table, a bar chart, or a graph? Yeah, I'd like everyone to answer. I know there's lots more of you. If you're not sure, just take a guess. If you said E, that's correct. So this is a bar chart. We call it that because it has bars, like a chocolate bar. Number 2, you can just type the letter again. All right, D is correct. This is a table. Number 3. Great, C is correct. So a pie chart. Number 4. Okay, number 4 is a map, B. And number 5. All right, a diagram is correct. You may also call this an illustration. So if you don't know that word, you can write it down, use it for paraphrasing. And the last one, number 6. Right, there's only one left. So it's got to be a graph, right? We also call this a line graph because it uses lines in order to show the information. So you can use the word line graph instead of graph over here. But just remember that these are charts and this is a graph. So when we talk about these, we like to use the full name when we write about them. So this is a bar chart, a pie chart, and a line graph. Okay, so this is the type of visual information that you would see, and then you need to describe the information that you can see over here. What we're going to be focusing on first is how to describe information in charts and graphs. Oh, just give me a second. Right, so the first one we're going to look at is a line graph. Remember, for task 1, I just told you, you should only be spending about 20 minutes on this task. So it's important to practice reading the information and understanding it quickly. Okay, remember, you can write some sort of plan before you start writing, but you should really try and study the information to understand what it's about. Right, so let's look at this graph, and we're going to answer the questions. So this just helps us to study the graph and understand the information. When we study the graph, we always first look for the title. Okay, this will give us some information about what is in the graph. Then we look at the different sides of the graph. So what is this side? What does it show? What is on this axis? What does it show? And then we look for any key that tells us extra information as well. Okay, so let's look at these things that I just underlined or circled, and we're going to answer these questions. So the first question says, what is being measured and how? So for this, what is being measured and how, we're going to look, is there any information that's measured in millions or a percentage? Okay, so have a look at the graph, and I want you to type in the chat box, what is being measured and how is it being measured? So this will tell you what is being measured, and then you need to look at this side, and it's going to tell you how it is being measured. For example, is it being measured in millions? Is it measured in percentages? And so on. Okay, so please type in the chat box, in this graph, what is being measured? Basically, that means, what is this line graph about? What are they showing us? What are they talking about? Okay, I have an answer from one person. Anyone else? Can you tell me, what is this line graph about? Okay, good. A couple of people have got it. So be careful, it's not about transportation, but it is about traffic growth. Okay, this is what's being measured. How it's being measured is in percentages. Okay, so traffic growth is being measured in percentages. The second question says, is there a time element? And if there is, what is the gap? Okay, so it says the word year. So we know that yes, there is a time element. Can you please type in the chat box, what is the gap between each time element? So if you're not sure, look at what is the gap between this year and this year. Okay, great. So it's 10 years. And a lot of you are saying a decade, which is great. This is another way of saying 10 years. If you don't know this word, a decade, please write it down. This means 10 years. This is a good paraphrase word. Okay, so traffic growth is being measured in percentages from 1950 to 2000. and it shows us a decade period between each year. So as well as the gap between each year, we need to think about the whole time span. So what is the first date? What is the last date? Okay. The next question says, are there two or more things being compared? And what are they? So please look at the graph and type in the chat box, what are the things that are being compared here? So we know it's about traffic growth, but what different things are being compared? Remember, if something's being compared, we look at the differences or the things that are similar about them. Okay, can anyone else see what else is being compared here? All right, so they're measuring the traffic growth of different types of transport. And if we have a look here, it tells us what the different types of transport are. So they're comparing cars to trains to bicycles to public transport. Okay, and you can see that you need to match the color to the color on the graph, right? So when you want to look at information about other, we look at the red line, which is at the bottom. So this is how you analyze the graph. Have a look at the title, both of the sides, what are they being measured, is there a time element, and what is being compared. Okay, now that you know what the graph is about, you can start to write about it. Being accurate about the graph is really important. All right, so if the information that you give is not accurate, then you'll receive a lower score. So you have to analyze it carefully and only give accurate information. So let's have a look at this little description. This description has some mistakes. All right, so we're going to look at what the mistakes are. So the first one is over here. Can anyone correct this mistake for me? So this is a mistake. This is also a mistake. So could you please type a correction in the chat box? Okay, so we have two mistakes here. So please correct both of them in the chat box. Okay, a few of you are only doing the year. I also want you to have a look at the country. Okay, shouldn't be and the Netherlands, but just the Netherlands, right? This is nothing about England. And then obviously the year is wrong as well, should be 1950 to 2000. All right, the next mistake is over here. So can you have a look at the graph and correct this for me as well? If you're not sure, have a look at what are they talking about, car traffic. So have a look at the blue line and correct this underlined section. Right, can anyone else see what's incorrect? All right, let's also look at the word just over. Okay, think about, is that correct? So the number is obviously wrong, but just over is also wrong. Okay, we have a look here, it doesn't go over. And obviously our number is wrong as well. Okay, so this should be 140%. Somebody said exactly 140, so that would be fine as well, as long as we're not saying by over. So either by 140 or by exactly. All right, so there's still some more mistakes. Okay, so I'd like you to find the next mistake and write the correction in the chat box. Don't need to write what's incorrect, just write the correction. What's the next mistake? If you're not sure, we're having a look at trains now. All right, I would say that this is more on the line than over the line. So let's just go ahead and change this to 20%. Okay. So this is pretty much on the line. So I would say 20% is fine. All right, please find the next mistake. We're having a look at bicycle traffic. Hey, can anyone else think about how to fix bicycle traffic? Right, so a few people have said approximately 20, almost 20, just under 20, almost 20. We use the word approximately when we're making a guess. So it's a good guess, but it might not be 100% accurate. So what we're going to do is take the line across here and try and make a good guess about where it is. Sorry, that's not a very straight line. But let's take this as 0, and this is 20. So I want you to try and make a good guess about what you think this number could be. And then we use the word approximately. So take a good guess. What do you think this number over here might be? So this is 20. Right, somebody said it 15. So instead of keeping this 20, let's try and make a good guess. We know it's less than 20, so we're going to make a guess at 15. All right, so we use approximately for good guesses. I would say 10 is a little bit too low and 15 is a little bit too high. 18 is a bit too high. If you said just under 20, that would be fine as well. So I would say the next best answer would be to say just under 20. Right, but if you can make a guess, have a look at the graph. Approximately 15 would be your best answer. All right, there's one more mistake with other public transport. Please find the mistake and correct it. So this is the red line. Right, a few of you are changing the word about to approximately. This is fine. We've already used the word approximately once, so now we can use the word about when we're making a guess. So both of these words, about and approximately, we use them when we're making guesses. Okay, should still be a good guess, but it's a guess nonetheless. Right, great. So a lot of you have changed this to 10, which I would say is accurate. We have a look at the line. Here it goes to about the halfway mark. But there's one other mistake, and some of you have found it. If you haven't, I want you to have a look at this word. So if you haven't corrected it already, what's the mistake with this word over here? Okay, so this should be increased, which a lot of you said, well done. Okay, we can see that it hasn't decreased because it started at 0 and it ended at 10. So this is an increase by about 10%. So both of these words are correct for making guesses. Okay, so well done. We're just looking at how to report, how to write about the information in an accurate way. So if you have to make a guess, that's fine. Use these words, but try and make the guess as accurate as possible. Okay. All right, so this is a line graph. We're going to have a look now at a pie chart. So this is slightly different. As we can see, this pie chart doesn't have any numbers. Sometimes it will, but sometimes it won't. Usually when we look at a pie chart, the whole pie chart, we think of it as 100%. So we could make guesses off of the information by using 100%. For example, half the pie chart would be 50%. Right, if we look at a quarter of the pie chart, it would be 25%. So this is how we can talk about the information in the pie chart, but we could also use words as well. Like we could say half, or we could say a quarter. So this is ways of talking about the information if they don't give you any numbers. But we can also just compare it by using comparatives, like saying more than, or less than, or the highest amount, the lowest amount. All right, so if you don't see numbers, don't worry. You can still describe the data by using either percentages, you can use halves or quarters, you can use comparative words as well. All right, so first let's quickly have a look at the information that we can see. We can see that there's a title. So this gives us the information. We have 2 years, and then we have a little key here about what is being compared. We're going to have a look at a list of statements, and we're going to decide whether these statements are true A, true according to the starter, B, incorrect according to the starter, or C, cannot be verified. So that means we're not sure. So you can study the pie chart, and let's have a look at question number 1. And I want you to tell me in the chat box A, B, or C. Is it correct, incorrect, or can't be verified, which means we're not sure. So number 1 says the 2 pie charts tell us the number of vehicles being used in the Netherlands between 1975 and 2000. Okay, so please type in the chat box A, B, or C. Remember to read the information on the table carefully before you answer the question. Okay, there's only 3 options, A, B, or C. All right, a lot of you said B, which is great. This is incorrect. Can you please tell me why it's incorrect? What should it be? So most of you said B, which is great. Could you please tell me how could we correct this? All right, we're not looking at the number of vehicles, we're looking at the proportion of journeys made. Okay, so we're looking at the proportion of journeys made in this vehicle. So let's say one person between these years, they take most of their journeys in the car, they take less of their journeys in trains, even less on a bicycle, and only a few journeys between these years using other transport. Okay, so you shouldn't be giving numbers here. We're looking at the proportion of journeys made. All right, what about number 2? Please read it and type A, B, or C in the chat box. So now we're looking at a comparison. So they're talking about trains and cars. So you should be looking at the blue and the red. Make sure you're looking at the correct year. So this is the first one. Is number 2 true? Or B, incorrect, C, can't be verified. Great, A is correct. So when we use as many as, it means that they're the same, right? Please read number 3. Now we're looking at the second one, year 2000. So here we've used comparatives, fewer than. We're looking at train, which is orange, and bicycle, which is green. Okay, so type A, B, or C. Right, B is correct. Can you correct it for me, please? How could we correct number 3? There's just one word that we can change. Yeah, great. So we can change the word fewer to the word more. All right, next one, number 4. So now we look at the word most in order to compare. And you're looking at car, which is the blue. So did most people take their journeys by car in 2000? All right, so this is definitely A. All right, it's quite easy to see. Look at blue, which is for car. This takes most of the pie chart. So this means most of the journeys were by car. All right, next, number 5. Okay, great. If you said C, that's correct. We can't verify this because the graph is not telling us anything about who bought new cars. Okay, this is not the information that we're looking at. And the last one, number 6. So here we have another comparative. So for this one, you need to look at both of the charts in order to answer the question. Right, so you're looking at train and bicycle, which is orange and green. And the information says, is it far less common, which means there's less people traveling by train and bicycle in 2000 than in 1975. And we can see that this is definitely true. Okay, the green and the orange blocks here are much bigger than they are here. Right, so there's no numbers. The best way to describe them is just by using these comparative forms: as many as, fewer than, more than, less than, higher percentage, and so on. Okay, so you have to talk about each year individually, like we did here, but we also need to compare them. And remember that the information that you give must be accurate. All right, another type of visual information that you have is a bar chart. This is a slightly more complex chart, okay? In this, we need to compare and contrast different information, all right? We have 3 groups that are being compared. This is called a stacked bar chart. So it's a little bit more complicated. And for most of this, we need to estimate numbers. Okay, so remember when we estimate, we use words like about or approximately in order to estimate. Okay, so let's just have a look at what a stacked bar chart is. So we can see here there's 3 different groups. We have adults, boys, and girls, green, orange, and purple. We need to read this as if each one was separate. So here we have 1 to 50. If we take this over here, then that may be about 70. But this doesn't mean that adults, green, is 70. So we need to read this as if it was only this amount over here. The basketball for girls would be only this amount over here. Okay, so between 0 and 50, maybe that's about less than halfway. So for the stacked bar chart, each block needs to be read as an individual block. Okay, so you need to make a lot of guesses about what these numbers are. So let's have a look at the basketball column. And we're going to look at adults, which is green. So approximately, how many adults do you think play basketball? So what do you think is this amount here of the green? Do you think it's A, B, or C? Remember I said you're not looking at the top amount. You're reading this green as if it was an individual. So if we took this and put it over here, then what would the amount be? So we're not looking at the top number. Imagine that we're taking this green bit off and we're putting it at the bottom. So then our amount would be C, right? Just 10. All right, let's have a look at the next column, swimming. And how many boys? So now this is the yellow. So how many boys enjoy swimming? Type A, B, or C in the chat box. So again, imagine we're taking this block and we're putting it over here from 0. And yeah, it would be about 60. Okay, let's have a look at number 3. So which sport had the same number of adults as girls? So you're looking at the green and the purple. This one's a little bit tricky because they're close. The correct answer is C, football. A lot of you said tennis. The green is slightly bigger than the purple here. So you need to look at the graph really carefully. This is a little bit bigger than this, whereas these two are the same. All right, and the last one says which group, this means adults, boys or girls, seems to participate in the most sport overall. So when we look at overall, we're not looking at one individual sport, but the whole bar chart. Right, and the correct answer here is B, boys. Okay, so we can make guesses about each individual sport, but we also need to look at the graph or the chart as a whole and write about that information as well. Remember, if we're making guesses, then we want to use words like about and approximately as well. Okay, and this shows that it's a guess. We're not 100% sure what the number is. Okay, great, well done. Now we're going to have a look at another kind of chart. This is a line graph again, but this kind of line graph shows predictions of the future. So sometimes you may need to write about predictions of the future. So this is not something that we know, but something that we're guessing. So let's have a look at this chart. So the first information tells us about the past, okay? This middle information tells us about the present. So this information is not a guess, but it's information that we know. And the last bit of information from 2000 to 2100 is a projection of the future. So this is an estimate, a prediction about what's going to happen in the future. So when we talk about the future, obviously we want to use the future tense. So let's have a look at some ways that we can write about predictions of the future. Okay. So often for graphs, we like to use the passive tense. So the passive voice helps us to show that we're describing visual information rather than giving our own ideas. So when I say I predict or I think, it sounds like my idea. But we use the passive, it is predicted that. Now it sounds like we're describing something. So to describe future predictions, we often use the passive form of the words estimate, predict, and forecast. Okay. And we usually start the sentences with the word it. So these three words, estimate, predict, and forecast, they all have similar meanings, meaning that we're making a guess about the future. So this is active and passive. If you don't know what this means, we'll quickly have a look. When we have an active sentence, it means the subject, me, is doing something, the verb. So that means I am predicting. When we have the passive tense, the subject is not doing anything anymore. So the passive tense, we still started with the subject. In this case, our subject is it. What comes after the subject in the passive? So who can tell me? We have the subject, what comes next? subject plus, look at the word is, what is that? It's the verb to be, okay? And then what comes next? What comes next? Subject, verb to be, and the past participle or the verb 3. Okay, so this is how we create a passive sentence. Instead of saying, I am doing something, subject, verb, we use subject, verb to be plus past participle. So now this is saying the subject is not doing anything. We use the word it is predicted, meaning somebody predicts that this is going to happen. Okay, and then usually the rest of the sentence stays the same. So here we may say it is predicted that sea levels will continue to rise. All right, let's try this one. So I'd like you to have a look at this sentence and complete it for me. So please write the whole sentence in the chat box. So here, this is active. We want to change it and make it a passive sentence by starting the sentence with the word it. Okay, so when you're ready, please complete the sentence, write the full sentence in passive in the chat box. If you're not sure, find the verb, then use verb to be plus past participle. All right, anyone else? We're doing number 2, remember? Okay, so we use the verb to be is, we use the verb 3, estimated, and the rest stays the same. That's sea levels. Okay, I'm not going to complete it, but the rest of it stays the same. Right, so sometimes we start with it, but we can also start with the subject, in this case, the sea levels. So now it changes a little bit. So what do you think comes after the word sea levels? So we still want to use the verb to be plus the verb 3. So what comes after the word sea levels? Okay, so you can just type in the verb to be and the verb 3 that we use. Remember, sea levels is plural. So we want to use the word are. Okay, then what's the verb 3? If you haven't written it down already. Great, are forecasted. Right, now I'd like you to think about what will we put next. So now we need to change something else. We need to change this will rise. So what would we change it to? So I wouldn't say sea levels are forecasted will rise because that doesn't make sense. Great, but we would use to rise. Okay, and then the rest of the sentence would stay the same. All right, so these are 2 different ways of using passive sentences to predict the future. Okay, let's try the last one. So now instead of starting with the subject, we can start with the year. Okay, and then we have the subject. So again, we have the verb to be are, and then the verb 3, estimated. Can you continue the rest of the sentence for me? So now the sentence is a little bit different. How would I complete this? Okay, there's no rise, so be careful. We don't use the word rise because it's not here. So instead of the word will, we would use the word to be. So instead of will here, we said to rise. Now we're going to say to be 500 millimeters higher. Okay, so if we start with it, we use is. If we start with the subject plural, we use are. And then just remember that if we have will in the sentence, then we change it to, okay? Because we already have the future tense verb here. Okay, if you struggle with passive, if it's difficult for you, then it's something you need to go and practice. Okay, you use passive a lot in your writing to show that we're not giving instructions, we're not giving our own opinion, but we're giving a description. All right, well done. So one of the band score criteria was this task achievement score. And we said this looks at how well you answer the task. So let's have a look at a task 1 question. So this is what you'll get in the exam paper. So the instruction is always the same. It says summarize the information by selecting and reporting on the main features and make comparisons where relevant. And then it gives you the word count, which is always 150 words. Okay, so to get a good score for task achievement, we need to do these 5 things. We need to have an overview. So this is like a summary of the main information. We need to describe all the most relevant and significant information. So this means the main ideas, the main points. So we need to give a summary of the main information and then talk about all the main features. We also need to talk about the key differences and similarities in the data. This is where we make comparisons. So this comparisons is really important. The next thing is to include only information that is represented. This means don't make any guesses about the information. Don't write about information that's not there. And the last one is to write 150 words. Okay, so these are the things that you need to do to get a good score for task achievement. The first one is really important. This is the overview. So let's quickly have a look at the structure of a task 1. So this is the structure. So first you write your introduction. Sorry, just one second, we have a question. Okay, somebody's asking, will we do multiple choice in writing or is this just practice? All right, in writing, there's no multiple choice. So that's for reading. For writing, you get your question, your task, and then you need to write an answer. Okay, so for task 1, you should start with your introduction. So there's 4 paragraphs. The second paragraph is your overview. So this is your summary paragraph. This can also go at the end as well. So you can either put it after the introduction or at the end. And then you have your body 1 and body 2. So these are the middle paragraphs. So what we're going to have a look at next is a really important paragraph, the overview paragraph. And remember, this is where we write our summary of the important information. Okay, so very important is the one sentence overview or summary of the main trends and the main information. You have to add an overview if you want a good band score. Okay, if you forget to do an overview or if you don't do it properly, then you'll get a low score for your task achievement. So let's have a look. We have another bar chart here. So we can first analyze it. We have a bar chart, and then it tells us what it's about. So this shows the reduction in traffic in Brightwater following the introduction of extra lanes on busy roads. Okay, so what we need to do now is have a look at and try and identify the main trends. When we talk about trends, we're looking at the patterns in the data. So where are there similarities? Where are there big differences? Okay, so for example, you can look at, this is before, this is after. What are the trends with the before and after? Do they follow the same pattern? For example, after goes up and then goes down and then rises again. If we have a look at the before, it goes up, then drops, stays the same, and then rises a little bit. So we can see that this is a similar pattern. Okay, we can also look at other things for patterns. For example, which one is the highest for both of them? This one is the highest. Okay, for both of them, this one is the lowest. So this is how you need to analyze the data. All right, remember to also have a look at what is being measured and how. So this says accident per kilometer. So this would give us accident per kilometer. So this is the number of accidents per kilometer. And this talks about the introduction of extra lanes. So over here we have the motorways, the M1, the M3, these are different motorways. And this is before the extra lanes were added, and this is after the extra lanes were added. So now let's have a look at these overview sentences. We have A to E. I want you to decide which one is the most accurate overview sentence. Remember, this is a summary of the main trends. So I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes. I'd like you to quickly read all of these sentences and then type in the chat box, which of these, A to E, do you think is the best overview? This means the best summary of the main trends. All right, so I'll give you 2 minutes, quickly read all of the overview sentences and then type the letter of the best one in the chat box. All right, I'll give you one more minute to think about an answer. All right, looks like everyone said D so far. This is correct. Let's have a look at D. So it says in every case, this already tells us that we're not looking at one specific thing, but we're looking at the whole graph in total. So in order to give an overview, we need to look at everything. So in every case, adding an extra lane on the roads had a positive effect on traffic incidents. So if we have a look at if there's a positive effect, so this is the number of accidents, okay? They added a lane, the number reduced. In this case, they added the lane, the number reduced, it reduced, it reduced, and it reduced. Okay, so obviously a reduction in accidents is a positive effect. So this is true. If we have a look at A, it says there were mixed results. All right, this is not true because in every case there was a reduction. B says in some cases the lanes were more popular. All right, there's nothing about which lane was more popular or not. So this is not what we're looking at. The same as C, it says the largest amount of traffic are on the M1 and M5. We can't verify this, we don't know. Remember, it's not talking about the largest amount of traffic on the road, it's talking about the accidents on the road. So the amount of accidents on the road. Let's have a look at E. It says all cities should incorporate this system on their main roads. Is E an opinion or is it fact that we can read from the data? What do you think? Is E an opinion or is it facts that we can look at from the data? Right, E is an opinion. So you should never write something like E. Okay, you're not giving your opinion for task one, and you'll lose marks if you try and give an opinion or if you try write a conclusion about the results. You're not writing a conclusion, you're simply writing about the data that you can see. Okay, you're not trying to make any guesses about what you think should happen afterwards or where you think the information is coming from. The only thing you're doing is writing about what you can see. Okay, so definitely no opinions and no conclusions for task one. Okay, another thing that's important is you only have 150 words, so you can't write about every single thing that you can see. You need to only write about the main features. So minor details and extra information should not be included. Okay, so a main feature from the graph we just looked at could be something like extra lanes were introduced to 5 main roads. A minor detail would be something like before the new lane was introduced, almost 8 cars had accidents on the M5 per kilometer. So we don't need to give exact figures here. It's not important how many cars had accidents on the M5. Right, this is a minor detail. It's a small piece of information. It's not a major feature. So let's have a look at a few of these, and I want you to decide whether they are A, a main feature that should be included, or B, a minor detail that can be left out. So just type A or B in the chat box. Okay, we won't do all of them, we'll just do a few. So number 1, is this A, a major feature, or B, a minor detail? So is this an important piece of information? All right, so this is a main feature. So this gives us important information about the graph, and we should include this. What about the next one, number 2? Right, this is B, a minor detail. Okay, we don't need to talk about the exact number of accidents on one road. What about number 3? Okay, 3 is also B, minor detail. We can leave this out. And number 4? So the greatest reduction in accidents occurred on M1, M4, and M5. Remember, we want to be making comparisons, looking at what's similar and what's different. So this is a main feature. Okay. So because you only have 150 words, you can't give exact numbers for every single piece of information. You need to look at the main features. What are the main patterns, the main trends, and this is what you're going to be talking about. Okay, so let's quickly have a look at this example over here. And this is from that stacked bar chart that we looked at. Okay, so remember this one. Sorry, 1 second, I lost it. All right, so that's that stacked bar chart about the different sports. Remember the overview, the layout that I told you about. So the first sentence that you write is your introduction. And the introduction we're going to have a look at in worksheet 2. But basically your introduction is just a paraphrase of the question. You look at the question and you rewrite it in your own words. The second paragraph, when you're writing about charts or graphs, is your overview. So this speaks about the main trends. So this is your overview sentence. From their responses, it's clear that swimming is the most popular sport among all groups. And of these 3 sports, boys participated in the most sports. Okay, so this sentence here looks at the data as a whole group. Next, you need to write about the main points and make comparisons. Okay, so this is your body 1 and body 2. So you look at all the main data and then you make comparisons about it. Okay, what is the same and what is different? Let's have a look at these 3 questions quickly. Can you find one sentence? So I want you to quickly read this. Can you find one sentence that should be deleted, taken away? So quickly just scan this and tell me which sentence should be deleted. So which sentence should we not be including? All right, can anyone else see which sentence we should leave out? All right, the last sentence is we can conclude. There are no conclusions for task 1. Okay, so please don't say in conclusion, we conclude. All right, the information doesn't tell us that girls enjoy hockey a lot and they don't like football, okay? So we can't just make up conclusions if the information doesn't tell us that. So remember the layouts, introduction, overview, body 1, body 2. Okay, no conclusion. Let's have a look at the next question. It says, decide what details are missing. So remember, we should write about all the main points. So let's have a look at that bar chart again. All right, so let's have a look at these together. I want you to quickly read this paragraph again. Look at the bar chart. And I want you to tell me which information is missing. What did they not write about in this task 1 over here? Okay, so I'll give you 1 minute to quickly read it again and then tell me what did they leave out? What information is missing? Okay, can anyone else see what information is missing? Look at the graph. They mention 5 different sports and then they talk about 3 different groups. So what information is missing here? Okay, a few people have got it. Can anyone else see what information is missing? What should we include? Okay, the thing that they left out is adults, right? They spoke about the boys, they spoke about the girls, but they write no information about the adults. So we shouldn't leave something out. We should be writing about each thing that's being compared. So let's think about what can we write about the adults. Have a look at the graph. Which is the most popular sport for the adults? Which sport did the adults participate in the most? I'll ask you again, which is the most popular sport for adults? Right, swimming is the most popular, right? So that's something we can say about the adults. Which is the least popular sport? Right, the least popular one is hockey. So that could be something we could say about the adults. We could say swimming is the most popular, or swimming and tennis were participated in the most, while basketball, football, and hockey were the least popular with adults. Okay, so that's some information we can add. Right, so if you like, you could take a screenshot of this. Okay, remember this is the structure of your task 1 for graphs and charts. We're going to take a break now for 15 minutes. So we'll come back at 9:40. Okay, so see you in 15 minutes, everyone. Have some coffee. If you like, you can take a screenshot of this. Remember, this is for charts, bar graphs, line charts, pie charts. This is the structure that you'll be using. Right, and here we're going to have a look at some vocabulary that we can use for talking about graphs and charts, and also how to talk about numbers and figures accurately. All right, so remember, one of our criteria is lexical resource, and this has to do with using a wide range of vocabulary. So it's important to avoid repetition. Okay, so don't just use the same words again and again. You must use your own words, use a variety of words, and also try not to use too many words from the question. This means you should be paraphrasing things and using a variety of synonyms. Okay, so here we have some vocabulary that you can use when talking about trends and graphs and charts. What we're going to do is match the word that's underlined to the correct synonym. Remember, a synonym is a word that has a similar meaning. So what you can do is just read the sentence and then type the letter of the synonym in the chat box. So here we're having a look at the word decrease. Okay, have a look at the words in the list and then type the letter of the word that we can replace decrease with in this sentence number 1. Okay, be careful that the grammar matches as well. So choose your word carefully. Which of these could be a synonym of the word decrease, but also fits in with the grammar of this sentence? So this is all really good vocabulary to use when talking about patterns and trends in graphs and tables and charts. Okay, we have a few answers. Anyone else? Okay, the correct answer for this one is F. So the word reduction. Somebody said D, drop is a synonym of decrease, but here it doesn't match. We can't say a sharp dropped. So decrease is a noun like reduction, okay? So in this sentence, the word decrease is being used as a noun, not a verb. All right, what about number 2? Please type the letter in the chat box. Okay, grade D is correct, so fell and dropped. What about the next one, number 3? To increase. So if there's any of these words that you don't know, you should write them down with the pair and the synonym so that you can remember them and use them for your task 1. Okay, so an increase is E, a rise, meaning it's increasing, going up. Number 4. So number 4, we're looking at this whole phrase, to remain the same. So often things, when they're not changing, they're remaining the same. All right, and A is correct here. So remain the same was to stay the same. Number 5. So we're looking for the word show, which is a paraphrase of the word show. Show is a verb. So a few of you had said see information. I can't say the charts information how many people travel because I need a verb. And information is not a verb. Okay, so the correct answer is B, the word indicate. So this is a synonym of show. If you don't know this word, please write it down. It's a useful word for task 1. And the last one, number 6. Okay, obviously it must be C. It's the only one left. So a paraphrase of data is information. So I could say according to the information in the table and so on. All right, so this is all useful vocabulary. Write it down if you don't know it already. You can use it for task 1. Right, so what we're going to have a look at next is the introduction sentence. So this is your first paragraph or your first sentence. So we can use these words in our introduction sentence. So the introduction statement for the description comes first, okay? It's important here to use your own words instead of just copying the words and phrases from the question. We can do this by using a synonym like we just looked at, or by changing the form of a word, like changing a noun to a verb, a noun to an adjective, and so on. Right, so here we have a list of introduction sentences. So the first one is the task question. Okay, this is the heading, the title, or the question that you'll get for the task 1. And then the second thing is the paraphrase, so our introduction sentence. What we're going to do is try and improve the vocabulary of this introduction sentence by choosing some paraphrases from the box. Okay. So first we can see they used a synonym for the word show, all right? Instead of show, they used the word indicate. But over here, they used traffic growth and then they said traffic. So can you find which of these do you think is a better paraphrase than using the word traffic in this sentence? So what could we use instead of traffic? Just type in the letter. Remember, you're just looking for the letter of the paraphrase for the word traffic. Okay. So the graph indicates the changes in what in the Netherlands from 1960 to 2010. All right, grade D is correct. So instead of saying the word traffic, we want to use a different phrase. We say the number of vehicles on the road. Okay, so this is what an introduction sentence looks like. This is your question. You want to paraphrase as many words as possible. Let's have a look at the rest of the sentence from 1960 to 2010. How could we paraphrase this? How could we write this in another way? So often we need to use years in our introduction sentence, but instead of just copying this, how else could we write this? What words could we add, for example, to use our own words a little bit more. Okay, great. Somebody said in a 50-year period. So if we count here from 1960 to 2010, it's 50 years. So we would say the graph indicates the changes in the number of vehicles on the road in the Netherlands. We could say in or over a 50-year period. Okay, and then we could say from or between, and then we can give the year. So if you don't know this phrase, please write it down. You often have to write about years. So this is a good way to do it. Count the number of years in between, and then we would say that that's a period of time. Okay, so the graph indicates the number of vehicles on the road in the Netherlands over a 50-year period from 1960 to 2010. Okay, so now this sentence is a paraphrase of the words in the question. We've used our own words, so we would get a good score for a lexical resource. Let's have a look at number 2. So please have a look in the box again, find a paraphrase for this sentence and then the second one as well. So you should be giving me 2 letters for number 2. So what is a paraphrase for sporting preferences, and then a paraphrase for 100 adults, boys and girls? Okay, so if you only wrote down 1, please look for the second paraphrase. So the first one is F. Differences in sports preferred by. What's the second one if you haven't written it already? And the second one is B. Okay, a group of people of a range of ages. So this here is a great phrase to use. Okay, please have a look at number 3. Number 3, you need to give me 3 paraphrases. So please look at the 3 underlined sections and give me 3 letters in the chat box. All right, anyone else? Remember, you're looking for all 3 paraphrases. Paraphrase for the number that have attended and their different nationalities. So the first one is A, how many? The second one is E. If you don't know the last one, please have a look now and type it in the chat box. So what is a paraphrase for their different nationalities? Okay, the last one is C, good. Okay, and then we have number 4, the average household expenditure. All right, this has to be G because it's the only one that's left. All right, so remember, try and paraphrase. You just underlining the key words and rewriting them in your own words. Another word that we can paraphrase is the word show. So in the question, they always use the word show. One paraphrase is indicate. What is the paraphrase of the word show for number 2? All right, tells us is correct. What about number 3? What's the paraphrase for the word show? Yep, we can see. So you won't just use see, but the whole phrase, we can see. And the last one, number 4. The word reveal. Okay. Some people might write this. I want you to tell me if you think it's correct or incorrect. The pie charts below reveal. Is it correct to add below over here? What do you think? Yes or no? Sometimes in the question, it will say the graph below. Is it correct for me to add it into my introduction? Think about your piece of paper. You have your question, but you're writing your answer on the answer sheet. So I'm writing task 1 over here. Is there a graph below? No. Okay, there's no graph. On the question, there's a graph below, but on your answer, there isn't. So please don't add this to your answer. Okay, if it uses it in the question, don't write it in your answer. It doesn't make sense. Okay, there's no graph or chart below your writing. So please don't add that in. All right, so this is your introduction. Very easy. Just paraphrase the question, okay? But if you need some practice with paraphrasing, that's something that you should definitely do. So we write our introduction, our overview, and now we need to write our body 1 and body 2. So this is where we look at the main features, the main trends, and we make comparisons. So when we're describing a chart or graph, we're actually describing the patterns in the data. So before we write, we should study the graph and try and see any main patterns or comparisons that we can see. So let's have a look at this over here. It's a bar chart, okay? It shows the net worth of the UK from 2000 to 2010 according to 3 different sectors. Okay, so the first question over here says, what is being measured on the left? So please let me know in the chat box. What is being measured over here in billions of pounds? So what is being measured over here? Yep, well done. It's the net worth, right? It says in the question. Now it says, why does the number 1000 appear twice? So here we have 1,000, and then we have 1,000 again. So what's the difference between this one and this one? Yeah, one is a negative. Okay, so the second one is a negative 1,000. So this is 100,000 billion pounds, and this is negative 100,000 billion pounds. The next one says, which set of figures shows what's happening in the country as a whole? All right, so these are the different things that are being compared. Which one of these shows what's happening in the country as a whole? So we're looking for a paraphrase of the word as a whole. is the UK total, right? The total there means as a whole, okay? So now let's look at some vocabulary that we can use to identify patterns. These are all really important. You can write them down if you don't know them. So we speak about the peaks, which are the high points. So these here would be the peaks. Then we speak about the troughs, which are the low points. So this here would be the troughs, okay? Or if we look at government, which is light blue, the trough would be over here. This is the lowest point. The peak would be over here. This is the highest point, okay? We can also talk about periods when the figures remain steady. This means they show little or no change. For example, we can see here that the household remained quite steady for these 3 years. We can also talk about periods when the figures fluctuate. This means they show lots of changes. So we can see that business shows lots of changes. It's low and then it goes higher, remains steady, goes low, and it's very up and down. So if we can draw a line and the line looks like it goes up and down a lot, this means that it fluctuates. Okay. Remember, we also need to notice which figures you can compare. That means say they are similar, and which ones you can contrast, say that they're different. Okay, so we can see here that the blue and the black UK total and household are very similar. They show a similar pattern. Okay, so please write these words down if you don't know them. We use them to talk about patterns. So let's have a look at these questions over here and try and answer them. So have a look at number 1. It says, over which span of time, so we're looking at time at the bottom, did the UK government's wealth remain steady? So I want you to type the years into the chat box. Between which years did it remain steady? That means it shows little or no change. So please look at the black, sorry, not the black, the light blue government, and tell me which years did it remain steady? So you're looking from between which year to which year? So remain steady means little or no change. And you're looking at the light blue. So if there's a small change, it's fine. Little or no change. Remember, we're looking at the light blue. A lot of you are not writing enough years. Little change also means it remains steady. Remain steady doesn't mean no change at all. It means little change. So if we have a look here at this line, so I would say that from 2000 to 2008, it remained steady. We can see only after 2008 is there a real change. So if you're not sure, you can draw on your question paper, draw a line. If it looks like this, it fluctuates. If it looks like this, it remains steady. Okay, over which period did its wealth decline? So for the government, when did its wealth decline? Meaning to go down, to fall. So have a look again at government, the light blue. When did it decline? Over which period? So you're still looking at a period of time. So we said it remained steady until 2008. Over which period did it decline? Right, from 2009 it began to decline, and then in 2010 it declined even more. All right, let's look at the next one. Now we're looking at business. So this is the gray. So which 3 separate years show a marked improvement in business? So when this is an increase. So have a look at business, which is the gray. Which 3 separate years show a marked improvement, which means an increase? Remember that this is in the negative, so that means this is a low point. This is when it's at its lowest. You need to find which 3 years was it at its highest. Which 3 years made a marked improvement from the previous year. So if we draw a line, so you're looking for the 3 separate years where it shows a sharp increase. 3 separate years where there is a sharp increase. So it was low and then it made a sharp increase. Which 3 separate years? So look for the points in the graph, in the line that I just drew, where it goes up. So the first one is quite obvious. It's 2002. Okay, we can see it goes up. But then some people said 2003. 2003, it starts to go down. And 2004, it goes down even more. So this is not an improvement. The next one we can see, which some people wrote, is 2008. So we can see in 2008, it's low, there's a sharp increase. So which is the last year that shows an increase? Okay, one person's, yep, 2010. Okay, so just be careful. This is the highest, but there is a slight decrease here. So the 3 years that it increased was 2002, 2008, 2010. All right, now we're gonna look at the total wealth. So in which 2 years was the total wealth more than the household wealth? So now you're having a look at black and blue. So in which years was the black higher than the blue? In which 2 years? It's actually 3 years. So if you wrote 2, then try find the last one. So 2002 is correct. 2003, it's slightly higher, which is the last year that it's higher. So you're looking for which 3 separate years is the black higher than the blue. And the last one is 2008. Okay, so if you're not sure, let's have a look. Here, the black is higher than the blue. Here, just a little bit. And this one as well. Okay, which means the UK is higher than the household. Number 5 says, which 3 sets of data generally follow the same pattern? So here are the sets. Which of these generally show the same pattern? So for this, we can draw a line. So from the blue, goes down, increases, goes down, increases. So this is the pattern for the blue. If we have a look at the black one, okay, think about all those similar. If we have a look at this, so which 3 of these have a similar pattern, which means they go up and down at similar points. So I want you to type household, business, government, total in the chat box. Which of these three have a similar pattern? So you should be typing three of these in the chat box. Which three of these have a similar pattern? Which means they increase and fall at similar times. So the obvious ones are the total and the household. Okay, these show very similar patterns. And then if we have a look at government, this shows a similar pattern as well. Okay, not exactly the same, but it remains steady for a while. It goes up and then there's a slight decrease around the same years. Which one of the four fluctuates the most? So which one has the most changes? And the answer is business. So we can see this by looking at the line, right? This has a lot of fluctuation. The line goes up and down quite a lot. Where for the others, it increases, it has a slight decrease and then goes up again. Okay, so it remains steady for a while, dips and goes up. Whereas business has a lot of changes. There's a lot of up and down. Right, so this is how we would use this vocabulary in order to talk about the patterns in the data. And this is what we need to talk about in our body 1 and body 2. Talk about what's the same and what's the difference between the different sectors. Talk about the main information and trends that we can see. As you can see here, we didn't actually mention any of the exact figures. That's not always important, to mention exact figures for every single piece of information. What you want to do is mention the main points, the main patterns, and compare and contrast. Okay, so often we talk about changes over time. For example, here, changes from 2000 to 2010. So it's important to describe these changes using the appropriate tense. Okay, should we be using past tense, future tense, present tense, for example? So let's do a few of these sentences. We'll start with number 1. So for each of the gaps, you need to decide which is the correct tense for the word in brackets. Okay, so have a look at number 1, and I want you to tell me, what should we write in this gap over here? The figures for UK households, something fairly steady between 2000 and 2002. So what is the correct form of the word remain in this gap? Should we use present tense, past tense, future tense, past perfect, past continuous? I'd like you to just write the correct word for the gap. Okay, so don't tell me past or present, just write the correct word for the gap. All right, so remained is correct. We just use the past tense because we're talking about in the past. All right, have a look at the next gap. Please write the correct word in the chat box. Okay, so the answer here is began to increase. Okay, began because it's past tense, and then after the word began, we called it to infinitive. So the to plus. All right, sorry about that. I lost connection. Let's just carry on. Okay, so we had remained for the first one, began to increase for the second one. Okay, so began plus the base form of the word, verb one. And what about the next one? We have the word rise. So look at this word by 2007. By 2007, the UK wealth Be careful, we're still talking about the past. So we're still using a past tense. But because of the word by, we use had risen. So the past perfect. Past perfect we usually use when talking about what came next in the past. Okay, so it remained the same. And then by 2007, it had risen. So when we want to use this phrase, we are going to use the past perfect. Right, let's just do one more, number 2. What would we use for this gap? So look at the time phrase again, between 2000 and 2007. Okay, anyone else? Remember what we used for this one if you're not sure? Don't get confused now. This is just a normal past simple. So if we use between the 2 years in the past, so past simple. Okay, what about the next word, increase? We're still talking about between 2000 and 2007. So household wealth showed positive figures and gradually increased over time. So again, just a past simple here. Okay, so please just think about what tense you're using, look at your time frame. If it's talking about the future, you might use the passive like we looked at before. It is estimated that, but here we're just talking about the past. So we'll use a combination of past tense and maybe past perfect tense as well. Okay, so let's move on to looking at numbers and figures. So sometimes we want to add information about numbers and figures if it's part of the main information. So after your introduction, you have to have your body 1 and body 2, where you talk about the trends and the main features. So if you add numbers, you need to add them correctly. So sometimes we write numbers in numerals, meaning the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And sometimes we write numbers in words. So please have a look at the things that are underlined here. Which information is written in numerals? So please just find which of these are written in numbers and type them in the chat box. So some of the information that's underlined is numbers, some of them are words. I'll give you a clue, I'll underline them. So what do we call these? We'll start with this over here. What are these called? 5%, 10%. They're written in numbers. What are they? Are these years? They're numbers, yes, but what kind of numbers? They're percentages, okay. So whenever we write a percentage, we don't need to write it in words, we write it in numbers. What about these over here? These are years, okay, so years, we also write them in numbers. What about this over here? Is this a small number or a large number? It's a large number. So yeah, if we want to write down a price or a currency, but also if we want to write down a complex number, meaning a large number, and we usually write it in numerals, in 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Okay, we're not going to write down 7,000 here, but we just write the number. Okay, now let's look at which ones we write in words. So here we have some words. So what kinds of numbers do we write in words? So the first one is billion. So we usually use words like billion, million, trillion. Okay, so these we usually write the word. We put a small number in front and then write the word. What about these over here? Are these large numbers or small numbers? 6 and 10. Are these large numbers or small numbers? They're small, or we can call them simple numbers. So simple numbers are 1 to 10. So if we're writing 1 to 10, you need to use the word, not the number. Okay, so please remember that. If you're writing the number 1 to 10, you should write the word, not the number. Right, what about the last one here, a third? What kind of number is that? A third. In English, it starts with an F. Does anyone know what it's called? A fraction. Okay, if you don't know that word, you can write it down. So fractions would be something like 1 over 3. Okay, we don't write 1 over 3, but we write it down in words like first, a third, a fourth, a fifth, for example. Okay, so please remember this. You would get higher marks if you do this correctly. Write percentages, years, and complex numbers in numerals, and you write simple numbers, fractions in words. All right, let's look at one more thing to do with numbers. A common problem is deciding whether to use an S on the end of a noun or a number. So does it have an S or doesn't it? So let's have a look at a few of these. So we need to complete the gap using these words. You need to decide whether we add an S onto the end or not. Okay, So please type in what would you use to complete this gap in number 1. So you need to use these words. Just decide which ones have an S or not on the end. So please write both words to complete the gap. Okay, so it would be 300,000 cars. So cars is a plural noun. It is more than one. There's 300,000 of them, so obviously we use the plural. Okay, please do number 2 for me. Okay, anyone else? Take a guess if you're not sure. Current figures show that this has now risen to over 12. The correct answer here is million. I see most of you are writing millions. So if you got this wrong, please make a note of it, write it down. This is not millions, it's million. Even though this is a plural, I mean, this is more than one, 12, we don't use the word millions here, okay? So if there's a number before the word, million or thousand, have a look at this one. It says 300, but we didn't say 300,000 cars, we said 300,000. So for words like thousand, million, or billion, we don't use the plural if we have a number in front of it. So please remember that these are not plurals when we have the number in front. Have a look at number 3. Here we have the word million again. So what should it be for number 3? Okay, now everyone said millions. So in this case, millions is correct. There's no number in front of it, but we're using it to describe a plural, which means people. So millions of people. When there's a number in front, we use million. If there's no number in front and we're talking about a plural noun, we use the word millions. Have a look at number 4. So please complete number 4. Number 4 is here. So according to the chart, 4, something were manufactured in the factory last month. Okay, I only have 2 answers. What about the rest of you? If you're not sure, have a look at the previous answers. Okay, so 100 doesn't change, but the noun changes to plural. What about the last one? Have a look at the word student. If we use the word all, are we talking about one or are we talking about many? And we're obviously talking about many, so we use the word students here. If we said singular, that would be 40% of one student, which doesn't make sense. Okay. So if we're using a percentage, we're always talking about a plural. We mean a percentage of a group. Okay. Another mistake that you can make with numbers is using the incorrect preposition. So let's have a look at these 5 sentences, and I want you to fill them in with the correct preposition. Okay, you can use each one more than once. So which preposition would we use for number 1? Be careful here, this isn't an increase and then car, we're looking at increase and car use. So it's not increase and just car, but car use. So the thing that's increasing here is car use. So the correct preposition is in, not of. If it was just cars, of would be correct, the increase of cars. But here we're talking about car use. So it's in. What about number 2? So we have the word number and the word students. Okay, of is correct. What about number 3? Now we're looking at percentage. Okay, of women and the percentage of men, correct. Okay, number 4, the figures, train and bicycle use. So this word, the figures, is another word for the numbers. So the figures or the numbers, something, train and bicycle use, reveal. Remember again, it's not just train and bicycles, but it's the use of them. Okay, anyone else want to take a guess for number 4? Of is incorrect. If it was just train and bicycle, then of would be correct. But again, we have the word use. But it's not talking about an increase or decrease in use. We're talking about the numbers for. The numbers for train and bicycle use. Or we could say the numbers for train and bicycles reveal. All right, number 5, here we have increase, and then we talk about one percentage to another percentage. So we would say from one percentage to another percentage. Okay, well done. All right, so if there's anything here that you made mistakes with, please write it down. Okay, remember, try and correct yourself, improve your grammar and your vocabulary. All right, we're going to move on to worksheet 3. So we've been looking at bar charts and charts, line graphs. What we're going to do for the next worksheet is have a look at how to describe diagrams. So you may not get a chart or a graph, but you may get a diagram that you need to describe. Okay. So another type of visual information is the diagram. Again, you should spend a bit of time studying the diagram before you begin to write, to make sure that you include all the important information. So in the IELTS task 1 for writing, when you get a diagram, it's always going to be describing a process. Okay, this is a P. So if you get a diagram, you're going to be looking at describing the process. And with processes, you need to think about what are the stages or steps in the process that you're looking at. So again, you have a heading. So this tells us what the process is of. It's how to make recycled paper from old newspapers. And you can see you have 1, to 9 steps. So what you're going to be doing is describing the different steps or stages in the process. So what you should do is have a look at each picture. The first thing you can do is have a look for any words that are on the picture already, and you can use these. For example, here it gives you some amounts, it gives you time, but it may also give you words. So these are words that you can use when you're describing the process. Here we have another word, mesh, another word, rolling pin. Okay, and again, it gives you some time. So the first thing you can do is look for any words or numbers that you can see on the diagram. The second thing you can do is think about how can you describe what's happening in each picture. And you can do this by thinking about which verbs you can use to describe the step in each picture. So let's have a look at number 1. I want you to look at these verbs at the bottom and tell me which verbs would you use for picture number 1. Please type them in the chat box. So what verbs would I use to describe what's happening in picture 1? Right, I would use the verb tear, right? We're tearing the paper. What about here in picture 2? Great, I could use the verb pour. What else could I use that's similar to pour? I could use add. Okay, and then the second part of the picture, what are we doing here? So we add water, and then what do? We can soak it. What other verb could I use? Or leave. Great. Let's look at number 3. So we're doing something with an electric mixer. Which verbs could I use? We could use mix, great, or we could use the word beat. Okay, we beat with an electric mixer. Here we have another word for number 4. We have tray. So what verbs could I use? What are we doing with the water and the paper? We could use pour into the tray. So we could use some prepositions as well. We could also use the verb add again. Right, what about number 5? Yep, I would use mix. We're not pressing it yet, we're just mixing it together. Number 6, what are we doing with the mesh? So have a look at the action here. What are they doing with the mesh? I could use put, but what's a better word that I could use here? Insert is fine as well, but have a look at the words at the bottom. What else could I use? Put or place it under, but there's one more word that I want you to find. Something that means that it goes under something else. We could use the verb slide. So slide the mesh under the mixture. Okay, number 7. Great, drain is correct. So we drain the water out. What else could we use? Think about what are we doing with the mesh? Okay, we're lifting the mesh. Okay. Number 8, now we have a rolling pin. So first, let's look at the first half of the picture. What could we use here? What are we doing? with the newspaper? Remember, use these words at the bottom. So before we use the rolling pin, what are we doing with the newspaper? So we take this mixture and we what? We place it inside the newspaper. Or we could use the verb put. Okay. After we put it in the newspaper, what do we do with the rolling pin? So this is when we use the verb press. Okay, so we can press it down with the rolling pin. And the last, yeah, we could use roll as well. Okay, the last picture, we have time again, 24 hours. So what are we doing for 24 hours? We can leave it for 24 hours or we can leave it to dry for 24 hours. Okay, and then our recycled paper is ready. All right, so after you've had a look at the drawings, think about what verbs you can use. Let's quickly have a look at this over here. So after we've made this, so we combined the water and the paper. After we've mixed it together, what could we now call this? Or this over here, once we've mixed it together, and when we get to this stage, what can we call this? Or this, it has the same word. So we don't want to say water and newspaper every single time. What could we use instead of saying water and newspaper? Did anyone think of anything? For example, what do we call this when we want to say we're putting it into the newspaper? We don't want to say water and newspaper. When we've added or mixed two things together, we need a noun. So it is now called the mixture. If you don't know that word, you can write it down. So if we've mixed two things together, it now becomes the mixture. So we put the mesh under the mixture, we place the mixture in the toilet paper, in the newspaper. Another word we could use here is pulp. So if you don't know this word, you can write it down as well. When we mix water and paper together, we're creating a pulp. So you could use either of these two words to now describe what you've made for the rest of the steps. Okay, so for steps, think about the nouns and the verbs that you can use to describe them. Right, the next thing you can do is think about how you can describe this process. So we do that by using words like first, then, finally, and so on. So these words help us to improve our coherence and cohesion. Remember, this means coherence, is it easy to understand? And cohesion, are the ideas connected well? So our ideas must be organized in a logical way, meaning step one comes first, step two, and so on. And they must also be connected together. You're not just writing a list of sentences for the steps, but you're trying to write a paragraph. Okay, and we can add our ideas together by using these words. So what we're going to do now is match the first half of the sentence to the second half. So let's do number one together. So quickly have a look at these sentence endings. Which one would we match to number one? Please just type the letter in the chat box. So this would be our introduction sentence. Okay, so quickly scan these. Which one matches with number one? Right, so D matches with number 1. Remember, first we have our introduction. So the diagram explains how to make recycled paper from old newspaper. Okay, now what is the first step? Remember picture 1, what was the first thing that we did? Great, E is correct. So first we tear up the paper and put it in a bowl. Right, I'd like you to do the rest of them by yourself. I'll give you 3 minutes. So just write the number and the letter on a piece of paper, and then we'll check the answers together. Right, if you're done, you can just write done in the chat box. Right, let's check. Please type your answer for number 3. Okay, so after we tear it, we add water and then leave it to soak. So H, number 4. What do we do with the electric mixer? Okay, so the phrase here, using the electric mixer, means what are we going to do with the electric mixer? The answer here is B. Right, we're going to, so now we need to match the verb, beat. You can see here we've used the word mixture and then we've used the word pulp as well. Right, number 5. So what did we do after we formed the pulp? Okay, we put it in the tray, added more water. Number 6. So here they're giving us the mesh. What do we do with the mesh? Okay, some of you said A, we can't put the pulp mixture inside the mesh. We're putting it on top of the mesh. So the correct answer here is F, right? We said we were going to lift up the mesh and allow the water to drain. Right, number 7. So once we put the mixture in the old newspaper, what did we do? So we open up the newspaper and do what? Okay, and A, place it inside the newspaper. Number 8, we use the rolling pin. So look for any verbs that we used with rolling pin. The verb that we're looking for is to press. So G is correct. Okay. And then last one, number 9. Finally, what do we do? Right, and at the end, we left it in the sun for 24 hours to dry. So C. Okay, well done. So here we have our process of how to make recycled paper. We start with our introduction, and then we use words like first, next, then, finally, in order to describe our process. So here we have a list of instructions. But we don't want to just list instructions. We want to describe a process. So in order to describe a process, we usually use the passive voice. Okay, remember passive, we just did it in worksheet 1. So for an active sentence or an instruction, we start with the verb, and then we have the noun or the subject. Okay, so it's what we're doing to the subject. We're tearing the newspaper. This is an instruction. When we use the passive, we want to start with the subject. So we want to say what's happening to the subject. Okay, so after the passive, we already said that we use, after with the subject, we have the verb to be, and then we have the verb 3, torn. Okay, so the same form that we just looked at. So let's try and turn some of these instructions from the list that we just looked at into descriptions using the passive. So let's have a look at this one, sentence number 3. I want you to try and turn this into a passive sentence. So we can start with the word then. Have a look at it and please type in the chat box, what would we use to turn this sentence into a passive? So instead of starting with the verb and the subject, we want to start with the subject and then verb to be verb 3. Okay, so we're going to use the amount, 250 milliliters of water. This is our subject. Verb to be is verb 3 added. Okay, what about the second half of the sentence? So again, look for your verb and subject, leave the paper. Now let's make this passive. Okay, I don't want you to just write the verb, try and write the full sentence so that you can see what the word order is. So it's the same as what we just did here. So 250 milliliters of water is added and the paper, which is our subject, or we could use it instead as well, is not leaved but left, and then the rest of the sentence stays the same. So if passive is something that you find difficult, then you need to practice that. Okay. So here often we're going to be using 2 passives in the same sentence. Let's have a look at sentence 4. So we can start it with next. Okay, I want you to complete the sentence in the chat box. So here's our subject. Okay, you're doing number 5. You're supposed to be doing number 4. Here's our subject. Here's our verb. So we need to swap those around and use the passive. I'd like you to write the whole sentence because there's other parts that we need to change as well. Right, so we want to start with our subject, which is the electric beater. Then what comes next? An electric beater is used. Okay, then what comes next? So we had the verb beat, but there's something that we need to add. So we wouldn't say an electric beater is used to beat the mixture. What would we say? Is used to beat. Okay, then the rest stays the same for about 45 seconds. Okay, but now something needs to change. So here, this is still active. It forms subject verb. So let's change this into the passive as well. Right, anyone else? I got one person with an answer. How do we change it forms a pulp into passive? Okay, great, until a pulp is formed. All right, last one I'd like you to do by yourself. So please type the whole sentence into the chat box. I'll give you 1 or 2 minutes to think about it. Okay, good. Looks like we got a few answers. So we start with then, our subject, verb to be, verb 3. Okay, so the rest has just stayed the same. We have another option here. So this is the first option. We could also start the sentence with the paper. So think about it. How would we complete the sentence now? Let's change the subject to the paper. How would we complete the sentence now? this doesn't get an ED because this is not the verb 3. Okay, it's not, it is forced. We just say it is used. Here is our passive. So it's used, then we just use the present tense for the second two verbs. So the paper is, what comes next? Okay, so the paper is pressed down, but we still need to include the information about the rolling pin. So we could either say using a rolling pin, or we could say with a rolling pin. Okay, but now something else has to change. So after and, what can we say? So we wouldn't say and force out any excess water anymore. Now it needs to change. So the paper is pressed down with a rolling pin, and now we want to use passive again. So in this part of the sentence, what is the subject? Our subject is the water. Okay, now we want to use passive is forced out. So here we use the ED. First sentence, we don't need to use passive twice because the structure is different. The rolling pin is used. Here's our passive. What is it used for? It's used to press the water down, the paper down, and force out any excess water. I can't say a rolling pin is used to press the paper down and any excess water is forced out. All right, we could do it. So it's possible to use the passive for this part of the sentence as well. So you could say to press the paper down and any excess water is forced out. Okay, so for the first sentence, both of them are possible, but for the second sentence, only the passive is possible over here. Okay, so when you're describing a process, for most of the sentences, you'll be using the passive because we don't want to just give a list of instructions. We want to give a description. Let's have a look at the description as a whole. So we'll have a look at the whole thing. Okay, so this is what we were just looking at. So it starts off with our introduction sentence. So this would be like a final task. So our introduction sentence, the diagram explains how recycled paper is made. So we have passive over here from old newspaper. Then we give the list of stages that we need. Okay, so we start with our introduction paragraph, and then we have our body 1 and body 2, which describes the process. So this should be one paragraph. This, you could divide it into 2 paragraphs. So maybe you would start a new paragraph over here. Okay, so this could be your paragraph 2, your body 2. Right, so we have introduction paragraph, we have body 1, and we have body 2. What is missing here from our structure? If this was our final task, what is missing from our structure? Remember that structure that I gave you. You need your introduction, you need your body 1, your body 2. Which paragraph is missing? Remember, no conclusion for task 1. We never write a conclusion. It's not necessary for this kind of task. What we are missing is our overview paragraph. And this should come after the introduction. Okay, so for the process, the diagram task 1, we must have an overview, which is a summary, and it needs to come after our introduction. Okay, we can't put it at the end. It needs to come here after the introduction. So what do you think we put in our overview paragraph? So there's no main trends. We can't talk about main trends here. What do you think we need to put in our overview paragraph? We have finally, so the last step is still in our body 2. Remember, our overview comes before the process, which is body 1 and body 2. So what information are we putting in the overview? We need to put a summary, but a summary of what? The summary of the whole process. Okay, so this is just 1 or 2 sentences that describes the whole process. So we put this before the steps because we want to give them a brief summary of the process that we're going to explain. So let's have a look at what that would look like. So before we list the process, we would say something like this. So the overview comes after the introduction. It is 1 or 2 sentences that summarizes the whole process. So you can mention the number of steps here. So for example, you could say something like, this 9-step process involves creating a pulp from newspapers and water, which is drained, pressed, and left to dry. So this sentence we could add in over here. Okay, so this is not a lot, it's only 1 sentence and it gives a brief summary of the steps that we're about to list. And then afterwards we would say first, the newspaper is torn. Okay, so the diagram explains how paper is made from old newspapers. This 9-step process involves creating a pulp from newspapers and water, which is drained, pressed, and left to dry. So you can mention how many steps you're going to talk about, and then you can quickly just choose the main points of the process. Again, if you forget to add this, you're going to get a low mark for task achievement. So your overview is really important here. And for the process type of task, it's a summary of the entire process. So that's something that you can practice writing as well. All right, we have run out of time. If you want, you could take a screenshot of this so that you know what the structure is for this type of task. You need an introduction, an overview, and a body 1 and body 2 in which you describe the process. Remember, no conclusion. The last step can just be finally. Okay, so if you like, you can take a screenshot of that. If you have any questions, please ask me now in the chat box. Tomorrow, we're going to have a look at maps, and we're going to do task 2.